Okay, welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Savvy Show. Well, really, the Face Off Sports Network. We are presenting uh, what we learned in 2024 in fantasy football. I am your host, Steve D'Angelo. Follow me on X at Fantasy Savvy. This show presented by the Face Off Sports Network. Make sure you guys are liking, subscribing. We got a ton of dynasty stuff coming up. It is dynasty time. The NFL draft is, a couple months away. A lot of prospect reports. So make sure you guys are liking, subscribing. But we are talking the 2024 fantasy football season. We just had the Super Bowl finish. The Eagles get the surprising blowout. If you call that, props to you. I did like the Eagles to win. I did not think they would dominate in the fashion that they did. The Chiefs do not get the three-peat. Patrick Mahomes maybe has one of the worst games I've ever seen him play. But we are not here to talk about the Super Bowl. We are here to go team by team in the NFC and kind of pull a lesson that we learned, or a couple lessons that we learned from each team as we go through each team in the conference. And then probably sometime next week, we'll do the AFC. So this way you guys can go back and, assess, and we can kind of talk about it in the chat as well. Things that we learned in the fantasy football season and then apply it to this season coming up. We don't want to forget about it. So we got this video in our archive. We can go back, check on some of the tidbits we talked about, keep it in our memory bank, keep it in our notes so we can improve in 2025. 2024, pretty good fantasy football season for me. Could have been a lot better, but it was good. I can't complain. Won some FFPC leagues, won some NFC leagues. I did 2 auction leagues in NFC, and I smashed one of them. Won a few of the RotoWire online championships as well. Finished in the top 100 in that contest. In the FFWC, I finished top 20 overall in their Circa Las Vegas contest. So I did good there as well. Also did pretty good at best ball. Won some best ball leagues. Didn't have any teams left in the end, though, in that final round. But, I think I did pretty well overall. Also Survivor. And then obviously the NFL box pools to end it all up. And I actually won a pretty big chunk in the box pool, which I never win. So I was kind of due for that. And Finland gets a goal here in this nation's face-off. So they go to 1-0 on the U.S. If you guys are checking that out. But join us tonight, guys. Thank you for joining us. And, jump in the chat. Hit us up. Anything you want to talk about from this season, or, you want to talk about the Super Bowl. You want to talk about college basketball. We can talk about that a little bit as well. We're going to have some college basketball shows. But let's get right into it. We got our boy Jamie here tonight. Says, hey, Steve. What's up, Jamie? Jamie, how did you fare this year in fantasy football? I think you play a lot of dynasty leagues, right? I'm only in one dynasty league. Dynasty's crazy because it's just all season. You got to be on top of the pickups. You got to be trading nonstop. And then, sometimes you don't know a lot of the people in your league, or, if you do, that's a little bit better. But sometimes guys have relationships with certain guys and they can pull off these crazy ass trades to really improve their teams, or they rob certain guys. So try to keep it to a minimum. I kind of like the leagues where you don't have to trade. But I play in all sorts of leagues. Jamie says he won a profit of 167.15. So, I don't know if he's telling the truth there, but that's amazing. If you did, Jamie, props to you, brother. So let's get into it. Let's start with the NFC. Again, next week we'll probably do the AFC, but let's start with the Arizona Cardinals. And again, we're applying lessons from the 2024 season, going team by team and kind of pulling something out of each team that we learned, and applying it in general across the fantasy football landscape. But, Cardinals, not the best season. Didn't make the playoffs. They finished 3rd in the NFC West. They go 8-9. Kyler Murray, was kind of gauged as a sleeper pick in fantasy this year. Just 3,800 yards passing, 21 touchdowns, 11 picks. He had 5 rushing touchdowns, so 26 touchdowns. Not a terrible fantasy season, but not like the Kyler of old that we're used to. The Kyler from like 3-4 years ago. And it seems like ever since he had those couple big years, he's kind of been regressing year by year by year. And then, and I got to be honest, I thought that this year he would kind of get a little bit of a bounce back, 2 years removed from his injury, his knee injury. But he really didn't run as much. And his accuracy just is not really, and his passing is not really, you know, getting to the level where, he's really progressing as a top tier quarterback in the league. So I don't know. Has he flatlined? Is there still room to improve? Marvin Harrison, the lesson we learned from him, it was, him going at the end of the first round, a lot of hype behind Marvin Harrison. Obviously, he's the son of Marvin Harrison Jr. So 885 yards, 8 touchdowns, not bad for a rookie, but for where you're taking him in a fantasy draft at the end of the first round, I was very, very hesitant to do it. Finland goes up 1-0. Sorry. I was very hesitant to do it. I did it in one league. I drafted like 40 leagues. I did it in one league and I instantly didn't feel good about it. I had to get that one Kyler Murray, Harrison stack. It was like the only league I had both of them in. And it just was not good. 800 yards and 8 touchdowns. Decent for a rookie, but not for the first overall receiver in the draft and not for the first receiver going in fantasy football drafts. Instead, it was Trey McBride, which we all kind of should have expected there. He got 147 targets versus Harrison's 116. He went for 1,100 yards, just the 2 touchdowns, which is, it's kind of BS. He got the touchdowns at the very end of the year, right? So you'd expect an uptick from McBride next year, even if his catches go down a little bit. We should be seeing, at least 6-7 touchdowns from a player like McBride. So, one of my tips is in the offseason, guys, is, now that we live in the YouTube world and with technology and everything, you could watch, game by game or all targets from pretty much any player that you want in 20, 30 minutes for an entire season. So we're in January. I mean, we're in February rather. We got plenty of time to study all these guys. I usually start my process after March Madness because I'm so into college basketball and so into the NCAA tournament. We're going to have some shows on that coming up very, very soon discussing college basketball. So stay tuned for that. But I usually start my process after the NFL draft. Then I start looking into the prospects, watching all of them, keeping them kind of fresh in my mind. I don't want to start too early and kind of lose, the freshness. So I think April, May, and then I'll kind of do a double check on them. One guy in particular was Bucky Irving. The first time I saw him, I'm like, all right, this he's good. But is he good enough to pass Rachaad White? Then I went back and watched again, spent a little bit more time watching him. Then I was like, all right, this guy is a real threat to Rachaad White. So, not just for the prospects, but for guys like Trey McBride and Harrison, go back and watch all their targets and snaps. It really just gives you good clarity when you're, drafting, and gives you a good feel. And if you can keep notes and do your own rankings or tiers, that's even better. So Marvin Harrison, I wasn't big on him. I watched the tape. Obviously I thought he would be pretty good, but I thought there was other receivers that were better in the draft, like Neighbors, like Brian Thomas Jr., that should have went ahead of him. So that's why I was kind of reluctant to take him, especially the first round. If he was going later in the draft. So that's just one lesson learned, do your due diligence, watch these prospects. Don't just go with the guy because he's the number 1 pick or he's just going according to ADP. Back that up with your own opinions and listen to other experts' opinions too. Try to get several other opinions and kind of try to weigh it all together. Obviously people you trust. You're not going to trust every fantasy analyst out there. So Trey McBride, though, just watching him, the guy was a freak. And you knew he was going to get a ton of targets. And we shouldn't have really worried about Michael Wilson or Greg Dortch or Zay Jones. These guys did nothing. Michael Wilson, 548 yards, Dortch, 342 yards. So it was really McBride and Harrison. There was really, McBride should have been like an all-in tight end for us, based off what we saw last year after Ertz left and how much he just went off. And then James Conner, this guy just continues to get it done. Another 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, another 400 yards receiving, and another receiving touchdown. So, pretty good year for where he was going in drafts. He seems to be a value every single year, and I don't see why that changes next year. He's getting a little bit up there, but he's still only 29. We're seeing these backs now, get into their 30s, 31, 32. They're still producing. So, even Latavius Murray, I mean, it was like 33 years old. The dude's still producing out there. So James Conner, I feel good about him going to next season. He'll probably still be a value. People are going to be up on Trey Benson still. I believe they paid James Conner as well. So, he's going to be ahead of Trey Benson. I do like Trey Benson, but he seems just more like a dynasty stash right now. And I don't know if he's going to be able to fully overtake Conner. Now, Conner, missed a couple of games again with injury this year, but only 2 games. So, Kyler Murray, I don't know if he's going to plateau anymore. I really don't see like an elevation from him. And I kind of think we should have saw that, based on recent history and what he's shown us. Marvin Harrison, we'll see. He's going to be working his balls off in the offseason with his dad, whoever else. But there is a little bit of a lack of explosion. And, you kind of noticed his head was not in some of these games early on. So, maybe he was just a better college player, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of doubt. He's going to drop in drafts now. I'm still not going to go crazy on him, but I still think, we got to pay attention to the offseason report, see what he's doing, see how he's looking. But we definitely did expect more from the first receiver taken off the board. All right, next team in the NFC West is going to be the Los Angeles Rams. And the big one here is, the big question coming into drafts was Kyren Williams. Is he going to be a bust this season? Because he really was kind of an afterthought. I kind of did like him coming out of Notre Dame, kind of reminded me of Ray Rice a little bit, his play style. But, he just wasn't really healthy. And even the year before, he blew up last year, 2 years ago. McVay hinted at wanting to use him, but it just couldn't really stay healthy. And then, it was like Darrell Henderson, and then, then Kyren came back, I think, later in the year. If I'm trying to remember. But then last year, obviously he was a workhorse and he just delivered in every sense of the fashion. And then they draft Blake Corum. And Blake Corum, a lot of people liked him a lot. Coming out of Michigan. Michigan won the national championship. And people were like, he's going to supplant Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams is going to be a bust. But we did not see that. McVay. And, it was kind of a hard thing to gauge because McVay's kind of been a little wishy-washy with his running backs, especially with the way he treated Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers. I mean, the year before, he's like, oh, I love Cam Akers. Cam Akers is going to be a workhorse. And then it was all Kyren Williams. Then they shipped, they basically got rid of Cam Akers. So, it was a little wishy-washy. But I think this is the warning sometimes and it's also like there's other guys you can apply that to as well. Like Jalen Wright in Miami. And also Ray Davis in Buffalo. These rookies come up and we're just so excited and, we're worried about taking the guys ahead of them on the depth chart because we think these rookies are going to, take over their job. But we saw what Achane did. We saw what James Cook did, and we saw what Kyren Williams did. So that's just something to apply to next year. Kind of beware of these rookie running backs who are behind guys that are already proven and have already shown flashes of talent and had a lot of productivity in the league. Second lesson here, I think, is Puka versus Kupp. We kind of saw the signs with Kupp, especially, in the playoffs. Last year, Puka was the higher producer. We kind of saw McVay, kind of giving Puka a lot of that Kupp role last year. And with Kupp's injury history, Kupp's age, we kind of should have saw the Puka Nacua true emergence coming. But Puka did have that, little bit of a knee injury to start the year as well. He was banged up, but then he came back. And then, he just went completely off. But Cup had his own injury issues as well. But, I think we kind of should have saw that coming. So, in offenses where, there's a younger guy who's shown a lot of ability and he is battling with the veteran, I think we got to kind of look for that a little bit. Obviously it's not 100%, it's not absolute, but I think we really should have all seen Puka Nacua coming this year and kind of been fading Cooper Kupp. I don't think I drafted Cooper Kupp in one league, to tell you the truth. Maybe a little bit of best ball. I did get a decent amount of Puka. I should have had a lot more. Again, he was expensive. First round too, or second, or maybe early second. So he was expensive, but he was damn well worth it. Big year for Cooper Kupp. Just looking at his stats here. The hell year am I looking at? I'm looking at 2 years ago. Yeah, Kupp. And he's gonna keep it going. I mean, this dude is. If you have any more doubts about Cooper Kupp, I mean, those should have been put to rest by watching him again this year. Again, yeah, this is the postseason this year. 141 yards in that game, and he had 11 freaking catches versus Kupp, who 6 for 90. But Kupp again died down the stretch. It was pretty much Puka just destroying him every single week, and then Puka goes for 990 yards in 11 games, just 3 touchdowns, but he did finish strong. And then Kupp goes for 107, 10, and 6. So it was actually closer than I expected. Kupp had the extra game, but again, down the stretch, Kupp was good early, especially those early games when Nacua went out. Kupp was kind of beating him up, and then down the stretch, it was mostly Nacua just kind of dominating. So just 2 lessons to apply there. The big one, though, with the rookie running backs coming in, just beware a little bit when a guy has proven himself the year before. All right, next team. And then we'll get into the chats, and you guys got any comments, we'll talk about it. Let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers. Interesting case here. Biggest one is CMC. Now, this one is tough because he freaking, the reports were crazy. Everything we heard was he's fine. We're excited about CMC. People say there was no misreporting on him, but I think there was a little bit, because then afterwards we find about this Achilles thing late, and then he's not playing week 1, and then it's a shit show from there. And he played 4 games all season. He left early in 2 of those games. Finished with just 200 yards. So again, I think the lesson here is, and CMC had been relatively healthy. So I really wasn't worried about CMC, based off all the reports I read. I just think the lesson here is he was pretty much the consensus number 1. Remember, Jefferson was the consensus number 1 the year before. And I know Jefferson got hurt the year before too. USA tied it up 1-1. But I think, we get stuck into these ADPs all the time. All right, McCaffrey, especially when you do these underdog drafts in the off season, everybody's taking the same guy every single time for the most part first. So I think don't get caught in the ADP. If you like a guy a little bit more, switch it up. A lot of, the guys who are doing, maxing out the best ball manias obviously are switching it up. But if you're doing 5 or 6, or, you're doing a couple home leagues, don't be afraid to just go against that traditional ADP if something in your gut tells you not to. And CMC, we'll see. It's going to be very interesting to see where he goes in drafts this year. Does he fall into the second round? I don't know. Probably not. But again, we got to see what the reports say, because obviously if he's healthy out there with the Niners, and we saw Jordan Mason have almost 800 yards, on a 5.2 yards per carry. Isaac Guerrero went for 5 yards per carry. So any running back that is in this system, is going to produce. That's getting the reps. It's gone back to the, Gary Kubiak, Mike Shanahan days. You think about all the backs that they've had, in history, and all those guys were good. Portis, Mike Anderson, um, Olandis, Gary, freaking, there's some that I'm missing. Remind me. But they're all good. So it's just this running system. They want to run the football. They have the offensive line to run the football. They got George Kittle, the best blocking tight end in the game. So McCaffrey, I don't think I'm taking him in the first round, but if he falls to the second, I don't mind it. And then I'd probably get an insurance with like Mason or Garendo again. But again, if McCaffrey's going to struggle with injuries all year, it's going to be one of those crazy second round picks that doesn't work out. The second round just seems to always screw you, with a lot of these picks. All right, the receivers, Ayuk, the lesson learned with him was he missed so much of camp. And my mistake was I thought he would just bounce right back in. He'd be fine, but he wasn't. There was a lot of bad vibes there, and it just didn't come. He was just not good when he was on the field. He didn't even have a touchdown in 7 games before he tore his ACL. Now they're expecting him back, I guess, for training camp, I suppose. And then Debo's going to be on the move now. Juwan Jennings was a one that we kind of should have saw as a sleeper, especially with the Ayuk news, the contract stuff. I think he's a guy you should have been targeting in best ball and in dynasty leagues. I got him in my dynasty league, I think in the 6th round or 7th round, something like that, based off that Ayuk contract. So if we see another guy holding out for contract and really gets late into the game, do we trust him? Let's kind of listen to the words. Let's study everything. Is he going to start out rusty? It might be a guy that if you're in a dynasty league or, just a regular keeper league, maybe you want to move off of, or if you're in your drafts, maybe you want to just be hesitant to draft. Again, it's not 100% absolute, but it's just something to kind of remember. As far as Debo, he just was not healthy all year, and he's kind of struggled with injuries throughout his career. One good year, one bad year, one good year, one bad year. Now he seems like he's definitely on his way out. And then George Kittle, I think he's the one staple in this offense and he kind of had a big year receiving here, 1,100 yards. His personal best, as far as second year in San Fran, 1377. But his best year receiving yards wise in 2018, his 3rd most touchdowns as well, and his most receptions as well since 2019. So, the past couple of years, they've been asking him to block a little bit more. So, that kind of took away from him running so many routes, but they were kind of forced to use him a little bit more this year. And, he produced. So he's one guy. And, I know in the past he's kind of been a little bit sporadic, but I think George Kittle, to me, pound for pound, with everything you consider, blocking, receiving, route running, breaking tackles, to me, I think he's the best tight end in the league. So he's a guy, he's the one staple I think you can rely on. And Jennings, we'll see how high he goes in drafts, but I feel pretty good about Juwan Jennings. And then Ricky Pearsall, kind of came on towards the end, showed some flashes. So that's a good sign. Another guy maybe to keep in your mind is Jacob Cowing. And that's pretty much it. Brock Purdy, I think as long as he stays with the Niners, and he's got a pretty good offensive line and he's got some weapons around him, he'll be a pretty good quarterback. But obviously it was a disappointing fantasy year for him as well. From last year, just 20 touchdowns. But he came in the year with that elbow injury, and then CMC got hurt. So again, sometimes we want to wait on these quarterbacks. And we kind of fall in love with these quarterbacks that only showed us for 1 year. And then we're taking them higher in drafts, or we're waiting for them for the value the second year. And, 2 guys I could think of as Purdy, and there's more. Kirk Cousins is another one. and then Jordan Love. And you had to pay the premium, which won't be as much as a premium as next year for Allen, Jackson. But those guys won you fantasy championships. So I'll pay the premium for those guys next year. I'll pick my spots with certain quarterbacks as well. Like this year, I picked my spots with Daniels in some spots. He was obviously very, very good. But Jordan Love, the spots I took him in, I had some good teams. There was one team I had Achane, Barkley, and Gibbs, and I had Jordan Love as my quarterback. And I finished second in total points in the league. But when it came to the playoffs, Jordan Love killed me, and I was going against better competition. Obviously, there's 4 playoff teams, and I ended up finishing fourth in that league. So I should have finished higher if I had a more stable quarterback there. All right, next team, last team in the NFC West. Let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks. And I think the lesson here is, we were wowed by the new offensive coordinator coming from Washington. But Geno, 2 years ago had that really nice year, 32 touchdowns. The last 2 years, he has not been good. 4,300 yards, 70% completion rate, but just 21 touchdowns and 15 picks. And then DK Metcalf, he's just not progressing the way we want him to. And, he's just kind of showing this year by year. And Smith and Jigba did pass him up this year, playing in the slot, 1,130 yards, 6 touchdowns. Lockett is toast. It's pretty much over for him. So, Clint Kubiak comes into town now. And, he's saying that, we're going to do a lot of things with DK. And we saw that early on with Olave and Shaheed, both kind of doing pretty well. And the Saints offense looking good. And he definitely helped Shaheed. That's for sure. Shaheed was doing well. And then, everything kind of fell apart. And then Carr, was out for 97 weeks. And they had to deal with Spencer Rattler for a while. And that was kind of ugly. So let's see what happens with Clint Kubiak. I think good signs for Kenneth Walker, but are we buying into Kenneth Walker? He's been injury prone. Kubiak's talking about bringing in a fullback this year, which I think will help the run game. But I think if you're going after Walker again, and I love Kenneth Walker, he just 12 games played. He's just a lot of injuries with him. So can he finally stay healthy for a season? If he can stay healthy for the whole year and you can get good value on Walker, I like it. Zach Charbonnet, filled in nicely when he was in there. And if you're getting Walker, I think you could go after Charbonnet as well. Or take Charbonnet late. I don't mind that either. I mean, I think this run game could improve with the addition of Clint Kubiak. But Geno, I'm not thrilled with. So I think a downgrade to to DK. I don't know if I could really buy into DK. Can Clint Kubiak revive Geno? I don't think so. So I don't know if I'm going to be going after DK. I don't mind Jackson Smith to Jigba because, again, he's going to catch a lot of those layup routes. And he's probably going to get the most targets in the slot. Now, things could change under Kubiak. We'll see. Maybe DK surpasses him. We'll have to see. We'll have to pay attention. But I think right now, Smith and Jigba, you're going to have to play even more pretty penny for him this year, too. So maybe DK will be the value guy this year. But that's a question. Do we believe what we've seen, or do we think that DK? I don't know. For me, I'm very, very cautious. All right. Jamie says, I only trust myself and Steve D'Angelo. Appreciate that, Jamie. Al says, what's up? And Thanos Heisenberg says, how much can they get for Kupp? Not really sure. I don't know all the details of his contract, and but if they're going to trade him, I don't know. I don't think they're going to get much. 32 years old now, history of injuries, maybe a 4th round pick. I don't know. I really don't know. But, it's not going to be a ton. I mean, and, I think if you can get him for a 4th or a 5th round pick, I mean, freaking who did Dallas get for a 4th round pick? The receiver from Carolina, Mango. Oh my God. What was that? A 4th round pick? I mean, so if they get a 4th round pick, you think you should get at least a 3rd for Kupp, but Dallas just made a terrible deal. I mean, that was pretty obvious. All right, let's move on to the NFC North now. Let's talk about the Bears. Again, similar to Marvin Harrison hype. Caleb Williams hype. First quarterback taken. Number 1 overall pick. The Bears moved off Justin Fields. They made all the right moves. They got DJ Moore. They got Roma Dunze. They got DeAndre Swift. The Bears are back. I wasn't buying it. I didn't take Caleb in any leagues. I love DJ Moore, and I took him a ton the year before. I had a career year with Fields, even though Fields missed 4 games. Was under 1,000 yards this year, just 6 touchdowns. This is like Carolina Panthers numbers for DJ Moore, pretty much. His 2022 season before he went to Chicago, 7 touchdowns. And with Fields, you had 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns. And again, Fields missed 4 games. He was playing with Tyler Badgett, who's noodle arm. So it could have been even better for Moore. And we saw that early on. Moore was pissed. He was not happy. I think got a little bit better at the end. He still got 140 targets, 98 catches. Keenan Allen, 744, 7 touchdowns. Odunze was another guy that I thought was going too early in drafts. I didn't really think I liked other rookie receivers over him. I didn't like, how he wasn't a big time separator. Obviously very good in traffic. And I think he's better, probably better than what he showed this year, 734, just 3 touchdowns. But Caleb held him back a little bit. So does that change a lot this year with Ben Johnson? I don't know. I got to see more from Caleb. I don't know if I trust him yet. And I don't know if I can. I feel like it's going to be a lot of the same, but certainly the offense should improve because Ben Johnson's got to be a lot better than Shane Waldron. So we'll see where these guys go in drafts. We'll see what they do with the running back position. DeAndre Swift was another one we should have known. Basically he showed us the signs that he was not producing on the line. So why was it going to get better? On the Bears. And actually, it wasn't a terrible season. They were 1,000 yards. He had no receiving touchdowns, had 6 touchdowns, had like 1,300 total yards. It was actually better than any season he had in Detroit. But actually Philly he had last year, he had 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. But he was kind of underused in Detroit. Plus he was banged up. And he got the most usage of his career in Chicago, 253 carries. Before that was Philly, 229. His most usage in Detroit was 151. But he's just very, very inconsistent. He had that like 4-week stretch where they played a bunch of trash defenses and he went off. But then, that was pretty much it. He didn't really give you much outside of that. So he was a guy that was kind of on my bust, but he was going a little bit later, like 6th, 7th round. But he just wasn't a guy that I wanted to like 0 RB on. I just wasn't really excited about him. But he probably won you some weeks. So it's not terrible. But I don't know. He just kind of showed us, with the Lions and with Philly, like if he was a really, really good back, he would have stayed with those teams. And they would not have moved on from him. But they did move, to be fair, they did move on from him for better backs like Gibbs and Saquon. But that's it. Hype with Caleb. Again, with the rookies, beware the hype. Again, do your due diligence. Are you watching these guys' throws throughout the year? Did you watch, are you watching a couple of their games in college? The quarterback's a little hard. Like that takes like an hour and a half to watch all their throws, but you could do it. We got plenty of time. So keep it in your memory bank. Keep it in your notes. When I watched Caleb, there was definitely concern. There was like 3 or 4 games where he was just looked outmatched by certain college defenses. And I was like, if he can't do that against certain college defenses, how's he going to do in the NFL? And we saw that in the NFL. So there you go. Roma Dunze, I don't know. I'm not a big believer in him. But under Ben Johnson, you would expect things to get better. And not a bad rookie year for him either. 700 yards, 3 touchdowns, not terrible. But again, first round pick. He was picked over, Brian Thomas Jr., which I thought was a mistake. I'd much rather have Brian Thomas Jr. All right, next team in the NFC North, Detroit Lions. And easy one here, Gibbs. We saw the talent from him. So, he was going to end the first round, early second. He was an easy click on for me, just based off the talent, despite the presence of Montgomery. Montgomery was a good value once again, for sure. But then he got, banged up a little bit at the end of the year. But still, he had 12 touchdowns on the ground, 775 yards rushing. The touchdowns help, obviously, a lot. Also had 341 yards receiving. So, basically 1,000 total yards and 12 touchdowns. You'll take that from a value pick like Montgomery. And then Gibbs, though, 16 touchdowns on the ground, 1,400 rushing yards on 250-yard carries, 5.6 yards per carry, and then another 517, and then 4 touchdowns. So 20 total touchdowns for Gibbs. So, yeah, at the end of the first round, based off the talent, I remember watching, those two guys in the playoffs last year. Gibbs and Cook in the playoffs last year. And I said, I got to get these guys on my team. And I did get a lot of Gibbs, but I didn't get a lot of Cook. Barely got any Cook because that was that 4th round. I just liked other guys better. And I admit, I liked Ray Davis. I was a little bit on the Ray Davis. Oh, he's going to get some more carry. But I went to that Dolphins-Bills game in Miami week 2. And I just saw Cook versus Davis. And I just realized from them, Cook was way ahead of Davis. And Davis was, he was pretty solid, but James Cook just gives them a different element with his burst, his speed, and his receiving ability. Still drop, I don't think he dropped too many passes, not compared to last year. But, man, he was awesome. Especially, he signified everything with that run he had against the Chiefs, stretching out that ball. That was a terrific run. So, people are going to be off on James Cook this year. We'll talk about the AFC. I think it's a mistake. Jameson Williams, all the offseason reports were positive on him. Again, first-round pick. Dan Campbell was talking him up, and it really came to fruition. So he was a guy I was going after, and, definitely had a very, very nice season. 1,000 yards, just 58 catches, but still 7 touchdowns. And he was a pretty good value for where he was going. Amon-Ra is the one staple. I don't think he's going away. We'll see what happens with the new coordinator in town with Ben Johnson out, but I don't think it should change that much. 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns. And I was kind of off on Amon-Ra the first, basically every year, because I was just I don't know if he can sustain just being a slot player, with not a lot of size, not a lot of speed. He doesn't get deep, but he just fits the system perfectly. And he doesn't drop any passes. He's got really, really strong hands, and he's just solid at what he does. So this will probably be the first year. He's one guy that I faded which was not good. Definitely could have helped me a lot more if I had more Amon-Ra St. Brown teams. So I'll go after him this year and watch. His production will probably drop off. But no, I don't think so, man. He should be solid once again. Another big lesson here is Sam Laporta. His price just got way too high based off last season. And, it was just way too much. And a lot of people were hesitant to take him, but he was still the first tight end going off the board. Again, we got stuck into that ADP where he was the first tight end taken off the board every single time. And we were overpaying. And, we did overpay. Just 700 yards, but just 7 touchdowns compared to last year. Came out a little bit more at the end of the year, but still, he was too highly valued, overvalued, and we got to be aware of that next year. Now, Bowers is going to be the guy, but I think Bowers is a different case because I think Bowers is a better overall talent. And, right now there's no other weapons besides Bowers. So, the Lions have their running game. They got St. Brown, and they got Jameson Williams. And they throw their running, they throw to Gibbs as well. So it's kind of more of a mixed bag. So you got to look at it a little bit different. But let's just be more cognizant of that, when these guys shoot up ADP boards compared to where they're going the year before. Laporta was an end of the draft tight end in his rookie season. So Gibbs, bet on talent, just an obvious elite talent at the running back position. And then the one thing I would say about the Lions, and which could be very worse if you invest heavily in the Lions or their running backs. If something happens to their offensive line, they get a couple of major injuries, then Goff's going to struggle because we saw when Goff doesn't have the protection, he kind of crumbles. So that's obviously they may be able to patch it together. That's like worst case scenario. But if things did start to fall apart for their offensive line, then it really will hurt the rest of their offense. All right. Couple more teams here in the NFC North. Packers. Try to fly through this a little bit fast, about 40 minutes. Trone Forrest joins us, says, "What's up, Steve? What's up, buddy?" Packers. The one lesson I learned from, again, Jordan Love showed us 1 year of productivity. I was a little bit too high on him coming into this year. Again, I don't think he was healthy. It started with that first game in Brazil. He got hurt in that game with that shitty field, and he was kind of just banged up the whole year. Not a terrible season. Almost 4,000 yards passing, 25 touchdowns, 11 picks. But it just, not the season I expected. And then, like in best ball, I was stacking with a bunch of guys, and I did stack him in redraft with like Watson and Dobbs. But again, there's so many guys to go around that offense. Reed, Kraft, Watson, Dobbs, even Wicks. None of them had 1,000 yards. None of them had double-digit touchdowns. And the fact that they brought in Josh Jacobs, LaFleur wants to run the football. And Jacobs went from the Raiders to the Packers, and I think we should have saw this coming. He went to a better situation, because we were scared off Jacobs 2 years ago. He smashed with the Raiders, and then the last year with the Raiders, he wasn't good. Everybody kind of thought it would be the same thing, but we were also worried about Marshawn Lloyd and the A.J. Dillon treatment. But once we saw A.J. Dillon go out, and once we saw Marshawn Lloyd was going to be out, we should have been way more higher on Jacobs. And he was a kind of the guy that the fantasy community was fading. So again, going against the grain, not going to go with everybody else is saying. Keep that in the back of your head. Not just, because he was a guy that a lot of people didn't like. So shout out to you if you invested in Jacobs. I didn't. I don't know why. So that's another lesson. 1,300 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns. He was a very, very solid runner all season. They made him a workhorse, 300 carries. And Love did not look the same, but you know what? Let's see where Love goes in drafts next year. I think he'll have a better season next year. I think he was a little too into himself from the year before. He's still like throwing off his back foot, all these freaking crazy throws he's making. And I don't think he was healthy. He had multiple different injuries. That MCL kind of bothered him. So, and then Christian Watson, he just continues to get hurt. Tucker Kraft, I'll tell you one thing about Tucker Kraft. If you guys listen to the show, I liked him more than Musgrave. Again, that comes down to the only reason I know about Kraft and Musgrave is just basically from playing, watching the prospects. But sometimes I don't go that deep, but I did go deep. And just watching Kraft in college versus Musgrave, Kraft just stood out to me way more. So, and that came into fruition. 700 yards, 7 touchdowns. We'll see how high he goes. But he's a good talent. He's a guy that they'll probably create even more for him next year. But Jacobs again, I don't mind going back to the well with him again next year. Marshawn Lloyd, I liked him as a talent coming out of USC. It was a disastrous rookie year for him. He came back and then he got hurt again. Came back, got hurt again. So he's still a guy let's pay attention to. All right. Last team in the NFC North is the Minnesota Vikings. And Sam Darnold, big year for him. Better year than I think most expected. McCarthy was there. And, Then he got hurt. And Darnold steps in, 35 touchdowns, 4,300 passing yards, just 12 picks. Jefferson goes for 1,510 touchdowns. So I think the lesson here is QB-friendly systems like a Kevin O'Connell system with receivers like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, and then T.J. Hawkinson coming back. I think we got to invest in those offenses despite the quarterback. I mean, he's kind of a quarterback whisperer. Look what he did for Nick Mullins. I mean, Nick Mullins was throwing a bunch of picks, but he's throwing for like 400, 500 yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns. You think like Nick Mullins can do that? You know, Darnold was going to throw, upwards to high 20 touchdowns, 30 touchdowns. You know, Jefferson was going later in first rounds compared to the 2 years ago when he was the top pick. So, and he was a value. 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns. That's great for a first-round pick. Compare that to freaking Marvin Harrison Jr., who had 800 yards and 8 touchdowns. And then Jordan Addison, 875 yards and 9 touchdowns, 15 games. So I think that's just a lesson learned. Like these very, very QB-friendly systems, like San Francisco, like Minnesota, like the Rams, it's not like they were bringing in a quarterback that was like a 6th round pick or an old journeyman that was kind of washed out. I mean, Darnold, was a 1st round pick to the Jets, and I didn't expect him to be this good. But Kevin O'Connell really did a hell of a job. He won Coach of the Year for good reason. So I think we should have been a little bit more bullish on Darnold in his passing game based on what we've seen from O'Connell's system. And then Aaron Jones was a good value. Again, low touchdown total for Aaron Jones, kind of been his, staple of his career, but good yardage, 1,500 total yards basically. So that's solid. And 51 catches. And he was a pretty good value in drafts. So we'll see what they do at the running back position if they add a couple guys. But, Jones could certainly be the guy again next year. And Jones played 17 games, so he stayed healthy. All right. FF Mediator says, what's up, Steve? What's up, buddy? What's up, fellas? Let's go to the NFC South, and then we'll finish up with the NFC East, and we'll wrap this baby up. Let's go to the Falcons. Again, similar to Seattle, new coaching system. We're getting exciting about the new offensive coordinators. And, the Falcons with Kirk Cousins coming over, we all expected them to take this huge leap up. Their win total was 9.5. And everybody was taking the over. Everybody was saying the Falcons are going to smash on offense. I was a little bit hesitant because we didn't really see it. More uptick for Pitts this year. I did take the under on the Falcons, under 9.5. And then Cousins, you could say, the Achilles injury. That was the other factor. And maybe he wasn't healthy all year. And then he had a shoulder injury that he just announced at the end of the year. So maybe wherever he ends up, he's better next year. But he's still an older guy. He doesn't have a lot of mobility. He's not going to have Justin Jefferson again. Shit, he may not even have the same talent like Bijan and Drake London. So, and their offensive line wasn't terrible. And more of a run blocking offensive line. But an older quarterback in a new situation. I don't know how much he's, could he throw 25 touchdowns again? Yeah. We'll see where he ends up. We got to pay attention to the reports. I'm not going to be completely dismiss Cousins. I'm just not excited about it. 18 touchdowns, 16 picks. Then we see Penix come in. 58% completion rate, 3 touchdowns, 3 picks. But, we saw some of the accuracy that we saw at Washington. My concern about Penix in the NFL was like if he couldn't be protected, then he gets a little bit wild. We saw that in the national championship game against Michigan. He just looked completely lost compared to the week before against Texas. But London had a nice year, 1,200 yards, finally over 1,000 yards in his career, and gets the 9 touchdowns. So, he paid off. London actually did pay off. His highest touchdown total before that was 4. His highest receiving total was 900. Also, 100 catches. So London did pay off. So he was the one guy that you could rely on. And Bijan obviously had a much better season in this system as well. 1,400 yards on the ground, 14 touchdowns on the ground, and another 431 yards receiving, 61 catches, and just one receiving touchdown, which is surprising. Darnell Mooney almost gets 1,000 yards for the second time in his career. Yes, Darnell Mooney did have 1,000-yard season with none but Justin Fields. I know the FF Mediators likes that one. But Darnell Mooney is a pretty quality receiver. So we'll see with Penix. We'll see how he looks in the preseason. We'll see what the reports are. There was a question brought up in Twitter. Who would you rather have, Terry McLaurin or Drake London? It's very close, but I like Terry. I think I could trust Jaden Daniels a lot more than Penix. We'll see what Penix can do in the NFL. But they still have Bijan. He's going to be a big factor of the offense. Obviously, 300 carries this year. So we'll see. But again, hype. We can't just assume everything's going to be gravy just because a veteran quarterback comes to a new situation. They got a new coaching system, and everybody hated Artie Smith. And look what Jonnu did with Miami. And that's the last lesson. Kyle Pitts. 600 yards, 4 touchdowns, still has not beat his rookie total. But the warning signs were there with Pitts. If you go watch his film, his route running is a little bit lazy. Doesn't seem like he's really worked on it. He's not really great at catching balls in traffic. And I don't know. I think is it over for Kyle Pitts? At this point, the hype was just way too intense. Again, hype. Few people live up to it. LeBron James, Bryce Harper, Wemby probably. Not a lot of guys live up to the hype. So Pitts didn't live up to the hype. People kept investing in him year after year. And I took him in some spots. I took him like in maybe 1 or 2 leagues. And it was just brutal. It was not good. Ray McLeod freaking wearing the number 34, Ray Buchanan, old Falcons player, had a better year. 686 more yards, 15 more catches, 3 less touchdowns. But there again, hype is something you gotta pay attention. But also watch these guys too. Again, watch your film. It's so easy today on YouTube. And there's other services out there, but YouTube's the easiest. There's tons of guys who are producing good content on YouTube. And you just subscribe to their channel. New videos come up. They got whole breakdowns of all the receivers' routes from the year before. It's a great way to refresh your memory, put in your memory bank, put in your notes to prepare for the new season. All right, Carolina Panthers, Bryce Young, everybody shit on him. Everybody gave up on him. Another reminder, don't give up on rookie quarterbacks after 1 year. And it looked ugly early. He looked terrible. But then he got benched for Dahl, and he came back to look a lot better. Just 15 touchdowns, 9 picks on the year. But he looked a lot more confident. You guys saw that one throw he made, that spin. He knew there was going to be a touchdown. So that was kind of nice. Some of what Curry did when he shoots a 3. So their offensive line should get better. They should get some more receiving weapons. Xavier Legette was a little bit of a disappointment for me. I thought he'd be a little bit better this year. Just 497 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's got to refine his game a little bit. I think he was more built for the college game, I'm going to be honest. But he could get better this year. But they really had no weapons. Deontay was a disaster. We saw he was on 19 different teams this year. The Ravens cut him. They dropped him. They picked him up. They dropped him again, and they picked him up again. So, Jalen Coker, Thielen's 34 years old. Thielen looked pretty good at times, but, this wasn't a lot of weapons. So they surrounded him with more weapons, better offensive line. Things should get better. Devastating injury for Jonathan Brooks. Maybe that's a lesson learned with the ACL injuries. And again, a lot of these guys now are coming back from ACL injuries successfully. But Chuba Hubbard was in front of him, and Chuba Hubbard was a good back. And then they paid Chuba Hubbard. And he had 10 touchdowns, 1,100 yards, almost 1,200 yards on the ground, 4.8 yards per carry. So a team that was kind of never going to make the playoffs and a team that wasn't really going to contend, with a running back that had a late ACL injury, are they going to really give him full go in the first year back from the injury? And we saw what happened. He tore his ACL again, I think, right? So that's definitely a concern. Your body has to compensate. And a lot of times you could get re-injured. Whether it's not an ACL, it could be something else. So, we've seen guys come back from ACL successfully, but it's kind of like a 50-50 thing. It's really, you're still taking a risk. So it depends on the value you get. And I get, like, you were getting Brooks later in drafts, so it wasn't bad. But again, he might not be ready for all of next year. So this is somebody to look for, the 2026 season. So for Dynasty, I like his talent. See what you can get for him. But Chuba's going to be the guy again next year. We'll see who they surround Bryce Young with. The Panthers got to make a lot of big moves this year, for sure. But Bryce Young should have a better season than he did, his best season next year. I would say, maybe 3,500 total yards combined with the rushing, and maybe 25 touchdowns. I think that's he could reach those levels. But again, don't just give up on a guy after his rookie season. And even Caleb, I give shit to Caleb, but I'm not going to give up on him. I did see some nice things from Caleb this year, but he's got a lot to work on. And we'll see if Ben Johnson can really help him. He's got the most coveted offensive coordinator. He's got no more excuses. I don't give a shit what it looks like. He's got to step up this year. All right, last team, Tampa. I'm sorry. Tampa. And then we got the Saints. Mike Evans and Baker, even with Liam Cohen as offensive coordinator, moving off Dave Canales, that connection, I think we should expect it to improve. And then, there's a lot of talk of Chris Godwin. Will he deliver in this system? They were talking about moving him back to the slot. A lot of 11 personnel, and similar to the Ram system. Liam Cohen had that relationship with Baker down the stretch there in LA. And Baker kind of did show signs towards the end there. He had that big comeback win in one of those games when he was in LA. But Baker Mayfield, 41 touchdowns, even better than with Canales, 4,500 yards. He was excellent. 16 picks. Think about like 3 years ago or 4 years when he was on the Panthers. After all those years with the Browns, he had that one good year with the Browns. Then he went to the Panthers, and a lot of people I gave up on Baker. Thought it was done. So credit to him for resurrecting his career. I guess, it helps when you get certain players around you like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and in certain systems, and you learn a little bit more from playing in the league. You certainly could bounce back. You look at like Rich Gannon and Brad Johnson and Vinny Testaverde, guys that kind of struggled early in their careers, and they bounced back, played a lot better in different systems on different teams. But Mike Evans, staple once again, 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns. Obviously, a lot of controversy on whether or not he should go to the Hall. I think he should. Chris Godwin, just 7 games, but he was looking great before he went down. 576 yards and 5 touchdowns. He should be back. And then the one lesson here, the biggest lesson I think is be aware of guys that are kind of mid running backs that you're going to go after in drafts that are even more valuable than the year before. And that's Rachaad White. I was going higher in drafts this year. And again, Bucky Irving, I did a second glance on him. I don't watch a ton of college football. So the first time I watched him, I was like, okay, he's good, but I don't know if he's good enough to pass Rachaad. Then I watched him again. I was like, wow, okay. I caught something on that second time, and I started to go after him later in draft season. And he just got such a nice style of running, just short, quick cuts. He sheds tackles, a good receiver out of the backfield. Just a very, very nice player. He's fun to watch too. Shout out to the mediators. I know they loved Bucky Irving. And that's why you got to watch the Dynasty content upcoming on the channel. These guys are going to be putting out a lot of different stuff, a lot of all the position breakdowns. So make sure you guys are liking, subscribing to the page, and sharing. Appreciate that. But Bucky Irving is going to be the guy next year. So again, Rachaad White, we got burnt on. And another guy we're going to talk about. Did we talk about the Raiders? Did I skip over the Raiders? Oh, no. Actually, I forgot to talk about Zamir White when we talked about the Raiders, but he was another guy. Smaller sample than Rachaad White, but he was another mid-running back that everybody thought he was going to be this value. And they bring in Alexander Madison, who actually, when I watched on tape, I thought he was better than Zamir White. Madison's weird. Like, when you watch him on tape, he actually looks pretty good, but like, he doesn't do anything with his numbers. Never look good. Like, he'll run really hard for like 3-4 yards and like get tackled. It's just, but he was better than Zamir White. So again, mid running backs that produced the year before, especially with small sample size, just be buyer beware. And then if they have a running back that they drafted, because the year before, what it was, Sean Tucker, Keyshawn Vaughn, the running back out of freaking Fordham. I don't know why his name is escaping me. The scat back. Somebody bring that up if you remember him, but I remember he went to Fordham in the league for a couple of years. I know people liked him, but he didn't. He was terrible. And then Bucky Irving, just a better talent than Rachaad White. So it's his job. Rachaad White should still be involved. He's not going away, but Bucky's going to get even more looks, and it's damn well deserved because he was absolutely awesome. Bucky Irving is an exciting young player to watch. He should be good for a long time. All right, last team in the NFC South is the New Orleans Saints. Clint Kubiak, who is now with Seattle, was their offensive coordinator last year, and things looked great early. Things were great early. Shaheed was going off. He was going off early on. He had freaking 6 games, 20 catches, 349 yards, 3 touchdowns. So a couple of big games, but he was on a good trajectory for the rest of the year. And then he got hurt early on, but he was looking good in the system. And then everything just fell apart. Olave got hurt and Derek Carr got hurt. So we really didn't get to see what Clint Kubiak could fully do. But I did like some of the things I saw. Kamara had a pretty nice year again, kind of died out at the end, but 950 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns, also caught another 68 balls. So, and Kamara's always been a receiving hog. And maybe that changes, now that they've moved off that, the final piece of that Sean Payton coaching staff. Dennis Allen's finally gone. Pete Carmichael, was gone, finally coming into this year. And now we have Kellen Moore coming into town. So I think it should look good. Kellen Moore, a lot of experience. Maybe he's not the best head coach, but it wasn't great with San Diego, or the Chargers, rather, LA Chargers, when he was there, his short stint. That could have been more of a Brandon Staley thing. So we'll see how it looks with Kellen Moore. But Kamara, he got paid. They're talking about, Clint Kubiak said Alvin Kamara is going to be heavily involved. Now, Kendre Miller, could he get some work? More so because Dennis Allen obviously hated his guts. I don't know. He kept him in the basement. Like, he wouldn't let him come out of the locker room. And then he kept him on the IR. And then right when Dennis Allen got fired, they bring him out off the IR, and he looks good. I mean, Kendre Miller I've always liked. He just kind of struggled with injuries. Goes back to he missed that national championship game at TCU, and he struggled with injuries his entire career. So maybe a little bit more of a factor, but I go back to Kamara. I don't know if he's going to catch as many passes in the system, though. I don't know if it's going to be that same staple now that Dennis Allen is out of the way, and he's not going to want to, ride the coattails of Kamara anymore. So we'll see what happens. But Shaheed, love his talent. I'll go back to the well with him. And Olave, Again, second round, he was going in drafts. That was, again, too high. The second round can hurt you. A lot of these guys get pushed up, and he was getting pushed up just because he was a receiver. People love the receivers. So I think he'll fall back maybe into the third, possibly the fourth round this year, and I think he'll be a much better value. I still like Chris Olave's talent, and I like getting him in the third, fourth round even better. And Derek Carr, looked pretty good early on in this system. 15 touchdowns, 5 picks. But that's what Derek Carr does. He has a couple games where he throws 3-4 touchdowns, and then the rest of the games he throws like 0-1 and maybe a couple 2 touchdown games. I think he's had 30 total touchdowns once in his career. So it possibly could have happened this year. Possibly. He started 9.5 games basically. 15 touchdowns. So there was a chance he could have got there, but most likely not. He probably would have finished with like 26, 27. All right. NFC East. Last conference. Mr. Magic says, yo, PPR redraft. Rank these in order. Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, CMC Brees. Very, very early for that. But I would say JT. I like the way he finished the year. And don't forget, JT was the number one receiver. Number one running back in fantasy a few years ago. So I'll give him number one. I got to throw CMC number 2. I got to assume that he'll be healthier next year. I'll go Jacobs 3 and Brees 4. I don't know. Again, the Jets, we're going to talk about. Actually, we didn't talk. We're in the NFC, so what the hell am I talking about? That's why I didn't talk about Zamir White, mixing things up. We're going to talk about the AFC next week. But as far as Brees and the Jets, the one lesson I'll tell you right now when we talk about the AFC is be very weary of trusting the New York Jets, and their team and their players. So I'll put Brees for it. So JT, CMC, Jacobs, Brees as an early rank there, buddy. Thanks for the question, Mr. Magic. Make sure you like, subscribe to the show. All right, NFC East, last conference, then we'll get the hell out of here. We're over an hour. Let's start with the New York Giants. And we should have known Daniel Jones last year did not look good. 2 years ago, he did. And I thought he'd progress last year, but he didn't. It was a hot mess. And then they lose Saquon. Were things going to get that much better for Daniel Jones this year? Likely not. So that's why, you weren't taking Daniel Jones. And Neighbors, was going, third round? And I didn't really like that price for him based on Daniel Jones and some of the other guys that were going around him. And sometimes he snuck him to the second round, but he was solid. 109 catches. He finished strong down the stretch. 15 games too. 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns, had 170 targets. So a lot of the projections on his targets were pretty good. And then Wan'Dale Robinson had 140 targets, but only had 700 yards, 3 touchdowns. It was just ridiculous. Early on, Wan'Dale was looking like he was a good 10, 12 points every week in fantasy. And then, Jones went out and they had to go with Drew Lock and DeVito, and Tim Boyle started a game. So that kind of hurt, Wan'Dale a little bit, and hurt Neighbors too. So, if Neighbors gets, a big, he's going to get an upgraded quarterback, let's assume. So he probably will go in the same spot, second, third round that he did this year. I don't know if he's going to move up into the first. I don't think so. Maybe in some drafts. So I think Neighbors, he's just a freak athlete. Like, he's not the best route runner. He's not like the technician out there, but he's just a freak athlete. He's so quick. He's got great acceleration. He could break tackles. He could body you. So yeah, that's really where Neighbors wins. But he could develop that route running even more. So they bring in a veteran guy, kind of works with him a little bit. But yeah, we should have expected, Daniel Jones and Dable not to go great. And then Devin Singletary. This is kind of a lesson learned for me, because I kind of just overly assumed that Singletary based off what he did with Houston last year, because he looked pretty good in Houston last year, but that was a better system for him. And he had some decent years in Buffalo, but it was kind of more of the same from Devin Singletary. 3.9 yards a carry. And I assume basically since he played with Dayball, he'd be the guy. And I did like Tracy a little bit, but not as much as others. And I underrated him. Tracy, again, he started out good, and then he kind of faded down the stretch a little bit too. But he looked good out there. I mean, caught 38 balls. He had 4.4 yards per carry, 840 yards, 5 touchdowns. So again, just like if a mid-back, even with the coaching familiarity, don't just assume he's going to be the guy all year when there's a more talented running back behind him, or even a guy that's kind of matches him in talent. And then when Tracy, got his opportunity, really showed out. I thought Tracy did some good things this year. We'll see what the Giants do in the draft, but I think they'll definitely probably grab another receiver as well. Their receiving room is kind of strange. Jalen Hyatt hasn't really worked out. Slayton, he's been there forever. Wandale, maybe, but this was his first year coming off the ACL. So maybe next year he'll be a little bit better. But, Giants are running it back with Joe Schoen, Shane, and Dable once again, which I'm kind of surprised at. A friend of mine lives in town in Jersey and goes to school. His son goes to school with Dable's daughter. And I was like, maybe it's not going to happen for much longer, but at least one more year. So we'll see what the Giants do this year. Credit to Mara. I mean, he's being patient. He wants to kind of keep the same system there. He's a patient man. But this is definitely their last chance. That is for sure. All right, Eagles. Actually, let's save the Eagles for last since they won the Super Bowl. Let's save them for last. Let's talk Dallas Cowboys. We'll go in order of finish here in the NFC East. I mean, CD was to be expected to once again repeat a pretty good season. It wasn't as good, obviously, as last year. 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns, and that obviously was hurt by the fact that Dak only played 8 games. But there was warning signs with the Cowboys when they didn't add, really any other receivers. It was just Brandon Cooks, who was getting older and older. Jalen Tolbert they were relying on. And then, trying to run with Zeke once again. And Rico Dowdle. And Dowdle wasn't bad. He came on, when they finally committed to him, he wasn't bad. 1,000 yards, just 2 rushing touchdowns. But the warning signs were there with the Cowboys offense. They just did not add talent on the offensive position, the offensive side of the field. And, CD, still a decent year, but not the best for a first-round pick. 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns, 100 catches. So I think the lesson here is just beware of what these teams are doing and pay attention to what the GMs are doing in the offseason. The running attack was just kind of perplexing. They could have had Henry. They could have drafted a running back. Dowdle's okay, but he's not the guy you really want to make your running back, make your running back. And Dak, it was just kind of obviously him getting hurt the offense. But even when he was in there, it didn't look good. 11 touchdowns, 8 picks. So we'll see what Brian Schottenheimer does. But I expect, CD to take a little bit of a hit because of this. Dak obviously will take a little bit of a hit in drafts because of this. I don't think teams are going to really trust the Cowboys as much as they have in the past. All right. Washington Commanders. Now, lesson here, 2 lessons really. One is Jaden Daniels was, if you watch the film, most pro-ready quarterback in my eyes. Really good processing. His scrambling. I mean, just the fact that he could run and, be a running quarterback in fantasy football, like even that alone for where he was going in drafts made him worth it. Even if his passing numbers, even if he threw for 18 touchdowns, and only threw for 3,000 yards. He ran for 900 yards and had 6 rushing touchdowns. So that alone made him worth drafting in fantasy. But then you had the reports that he's doing this virtual reality thing. He's the first one in the building. He's the last one to leave. He's working his ass off. And he was doing that in college. And he was doing it in the NFL too. So I had my doubts about Cliff Kingsbury, but that Thailand trip, whatever he did, he seemed to change some things up in his style of offense. It worked. He was a great fit with Daniels this year. And Daniels probably helped him. Obviously, I think a little bit, but I think Cliff did some good things. And he could have had that Saints coaching job, but he passed it up. And he's going to stick with the Commanders for another year. So it's great for Daniels. I think it's good for Daniels. And then Terry McLaurin, like the yardage was similar to what he did every year. And so were the receptions. Let's see. Yeah, they were similar, like in the 80s, high 70 range. But the touchdowns, 13 touchdowns. His previous high was his rookie season with 7. And you just had to expect this would be a career year for him based on the quarterback play that he had prior, which was Sam Howell, what was it, Fitzpatrick, Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke, but still 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons for Scary Terry. And you just had to think, there's no way he's not getting 1,000 yards. And his touchdown total should go up after going 4.554 the last 4 years. And he finished with 13. So Terry should smash again next year. Double-digit touchdowns. Now we'll see if they add another big weapon in the receiving room. It's possible. But Terry should be the number one. I would expect another 1,000 yards from him, another double-digit touchdown season. And it could even get better than that. Still 29 years old, still kind of in the prime of his career. I guess he'll be 30 next year, but still look really good. And Daniels, what's stopping him from throwing 30, 35 touchdowns next year? Maybe finishing with 40 total touchdowns, like a Josh Allen type of year. It's possible. And think about Daniels. He got hurt in that Panthers game. He was off for like a month. And then once he got healthy, things picked up for him again. So that's a little bit of concern. He's a little on the smaller side, but I think Daniels, he's smart. He's nimble enough. You just watch him. He knows he can evade pressure. He's got the quickness to evade pressure. So you just got to be smart, continue to slide. But of course, he'll probably take 1 or 2 big hits. You guys remember in college, he took that big hit against Bama. I think he missed like the rest of the game. But he probably learned from that. So I'm very bullish once again on Terry McLaurin. So that's just a lesson learned. If you've got a veteran receiver that's done it with shittier quarterbacks and then gets an upgraded quarterback similar. I'll say it, like even with DJ Moore, when he came from Carolina to Chicago, he went from Sam Darnold, freaking, who the hell was the other quarterback there? That was Allen. Allen's last name was Allen. He was terrible. I think he had Baker one year, but Baker was just not, similar. So when he went from Carolina, and I always loved DJ Moore, but the quarterback play was subpar. And then when he went to Chicago, I invested him because I felt like Fields was the best quarterback he had. And he did have a career season with Fields. So that's what McLaurin did. He had a career season with Daniels. So that's just another thing. If a receiver trades team, goes to a different team, a veteran receiver gets a quarterback upgrade, or a new quarterback comes into town and is an obvious upgrade, like Daniels was, invest in that receiver, especially when there's not a lot of the receiving weapons around him. Like DJ Moore, there's no real other threats. Same with the Commanders. It was Zacchaeus and Luke McCaffrey and Diami Brown. And props to Zach Ertz, man. 654 yards, 7 touchdowns at that big game against Philly in the playoffs. So, aging tight ends with good quarterback play, good offensive system. still have good value as well. And Ertz, man, I mean, he was healthy this year. That's another thing that's kind of held him back. Really made some big catches. So 12 touchdowns. I mean, I'm sorry, 7 touchdowns for Ertz. 2-1 USA in the nation's face-off. They get the goal. 2 minutes left or 3 minutes left here in the second period. All right, last team, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. And I will admit, I was wrong about this Philly team pretty much all year, even coming into the season. The way they finished last year, the way they started out hot, played great, and they collapsed down the stretch. And I just thought Sirianni should have been fired. I thought Hurts had regressed. I didn't think they were going to bounce back. I thought it would be another, disappointing year for Philly. But I was dead wrong. Howie Roseman, credit to him. He's an excellent GM. And he's been pretty good since he's been there. He's made a lot of good moves. They draft Mitchell. They draft DeJean. They bring in Saquon Barkley. They bring in Fangio. They bring in Kellen Moore because their coordinators after Gannon and Steichen left, their coordinators last year stunk. And they got 2 proven guys. Kellen Moore had some questions on, but Fangio certainly was proven. Kellen Moore did a great job. I kind of was doubting him a little bit too, but he did a great job. And Saquon obviously was like a match made in heaven in that offense. So, Saquon, I drafted him in, I would say like maybe 10% of my leagues. Should have been way more. I had him in some big spots. I was fortunate to get him after the fact, after he had that huge game in Brazil. I did a draft after the fact, and I got him 12th, which was surprising, or 10th overall, because I did a couple other drafts after that game, even after that draft, and he was going like 2nd overall, and he was just awesome all year. But we should have all realized that Saquon was in the best situation of his career, the best offensive line of his career. And we should all realize that he was going to be a smash. I mean, he's arguably the most talented running back to come out of the draft since Adrian Peterson, right? I mean, maybe I'm missing a guy, but I mean, I just remember when he came out of Penn State, I'm like, this guy is freaking different. Even more so than Bijan. Like, I like Bijan, but I don't think he was like Saquon. I don't think he's like Saquon's level. I think Saquon's like a step above Bijan. And an absolute smash of a season. Just went completely off. 2,000 yards on the ground, 13 touchdowns on the ground, 278 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. Only caught 33 balls, but so many yards on the ground. And then Jalen Hurts, wasn't great actually because Barkley took most of the thunder. Just 3,000 yards passing, 18 touchdowns, 5 picks for Hurts through the air, but did have 14 rushing touchdowns. So the tush push was still alive, and that's a lesson learned. Doesn't matter really. I think a lot of it has to do with Hurts. So it doesn't matter who the freak the center is, as long as they let that system go, and we'll see if that changes because of the Luvu jumping over the pile. Maybe Luvu, helps us all out and not have to deal with that freaking tush push. Imagine there was no tush push. Saquon, 25 touch. He's having like a LaDainian Tomlinson, Priest Holmes type fantasy season. When we were getting like 25, 26 touchdowns, it would have been really the full return of the elite fantasy football running back, like the LaDainian, like the Priest Holmes. I mean, it's still 2,000 yards rushing and freaking 15 touchdowns is terrific. But he could have had 25, maybe 30 touchdowns. Who the hell knows? So we'll see what happens the league does. But, Hurts, still very good fantasy season with all those rushing touchdowns. And then A.J. Brown, 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. Devonta, a little bit disappointing for where he was going. Again, he was going kind of high. A.J. Brown was going kind of high. So they're both kind of disappointments. Saquon just really took a lot of the thunder. And I don't see why Philly's going to go away. It's going to be a lot of Saquon next year as well. But second year with Kellen Moore, the confidence coming off the Super Bowl, Hurts should probably have some better passing numbers next season. He'll probably should get into the 20s and into 3,000 yards as well. Marks next season. Brown should hopefully get double-digit range. There's no way he should just have 7. Then Devonta should be a 1,000-yard receiver every single year. So we'll see. But again, they both missed time. Brown missed 4 games, and Devonta missed 4 games. So with more games, and then Dallas Goedert, he just gets hurt every single year. Another 10 games, he gets hurt every year. The guy can't play a full season. If he did, he'd be a lot more productive in fantasy. So you kind of at this point, you got to expect Dallas Goedert to get hurt again. So that's it, guys. That's all of the NFC. An hour 26. Thank you for joining us tonight. So just lessons learned, guys. Let's keep these in the back of our head. Let's continue to think about these lessons and apply new ones as well. As we get closer to redraft season, we're coming up to dynasty season. Then we'll have best ball season, and then we'll have redraft season. And the new season will be here before you know it. We'll go through summer. We'll get tuned in. We'll get focused, and we'll have the best 2025 season that we possibly can have. So make sure you stay tuned to the Face Off Sports Network. Like, subscribe, share. Stay tuned for tons of Dynasty content. Stay tuned for next week. We'll break down the entire AFC. And that's pretty much it. Take care. We'll see you next time. Again, like, subscribe, share. Follow me on X at Fantasy Savvy.